All right. Welcome to episode 12 of We're Not Friends podcast, otherwise known as WNF podcast.
Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back. We've got a slightly different format this time. I think we're trying to find our rhythm and, what makes sense and what is interesting for people to listen to. So I think we're going to switch it up for the next couple of episodes and see how you guys like it.
Yeah. We think that just going off topics like current events, it's actually turning the whole thing into a total bummer. And it fucking sucks. I mean, and the reality is the reason why it's such a bummer is because times are tough and like current events, just shit keeps happening that's not good, and it just, it's like we keep taking the hits, we like bad shit keeps happening. And it's not like we can just continue to like put a positive fucking spin on shit just to make it like humorous or like poke fun at it and all that stuff. Sometimes life is just not great. And unfortunately, things are just not going well in the current events. And I don't know if it's just because of the fact that we're leading up to an election and news makes things very dramatic, this time of year. So I don't know.
I think it's more than that. I think there's a lot of pretty shitty things going on in the world.
For sure.
And we keep thinking we're going to course correct and do better, but we're not. We just keep doing shitty stuff. So it's not like we could talk current events to death, but we're thinking, like everybody hears the fucking news all goddamn day. We don't want to bum people out. So we've gotten feedback in the past of some topics of interest. And one that has consistently come up has been Jean and I's relationship. And I guess that is of interest to some people. So we'll talk about, relationship related things for a couple of episodes and see if it's interesting. And if it's not, that's fine. We'll go back to talking about the news. This is still pretty fresh and new to us, so we're just trying to find something that works for all of us and that is of interest to you guys.
Yeah, this is absolutely about finding our groove and just trying to make sure that whatever we're talking about comes natural, because the last thing anybody, especially you guys, want to hear is just us just rambling about bullshit. Just to fucking talk about it because it happened that week, and it just being the same shit that you guys hear on any other podcast or the same shit that you see on the news. So that's not what we want to deliver to you guys. We think if we're going to provide something unique, it's going to be because it's genuinely us. So that's what we're going to do. And, that's it's not going to be current events based for right now.
We'll see. Yeah. Whatever works, man. So give us your feedback after this episode. So for those who have been listening or maybe picked us up on an off or random episode or don't really know us prior to the podcast, Jean and I have been together for 11 years, married for a little over 4. Consistently. We haven't had any. We've had, of course, everybody has like bumpy times in relationships, but we've never like broken up and gotten back together. We have been together consistently for 11 years.
Yeah, and we'll talk about those bumpy times because it's not a unique circumstance. It's something that people all run into. And we'll talk about some of the factors that all kind of played into it whenever we hit those rough patches. And I think that that's going to be something that I hope is helpful to other couples or other people and the beginning of the relationship and things like that. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to relive all of my 21-year-old stories, as I would think we probably have a little older audience listening to us. But yeah, we'll talk about relevant topics. So, what do you want to get into?
What do you think is the average amount of years for marriage in the U.S.?
I know I've read this. I don't know, like 4?
No, It's double that. It's 8.
Oh, 8. Okay.
But that's still not fucking great.
No.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, is it though? I mean, I've told you my opinions about.
Well, hold on. Follow up to that. What do you think is the average amount of time for a marriage in the world?
15 years.
Yeah. 15 to 18, they say.
Nice.
They say roughly. So good job on that. But yeah, I mean, so, roughly double what the average is for the U.S., which is pretty fucking sad.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know. I mean, perhaps we have more influences to our relationship or we pay more mind to it. I think there's a little bit, at least recently, not necessarily when my parents were young, but I think recently there's less of that whole stay together for the kids thing or stay together for religious purposes. I think you probably get a little more of that in other places in the world.
Yeah, that's definitely true. What are some other unique factors you think that play onto the U.S. being?
Well, haven't you told me before you move on?
Yeah.
Haven't you told me in the past, like when you were in Italy, that it was quite common there?
Yeah. So I don't want to speak for every Italian family, but I'll give you an example. Whenever I spent a lot of time with a good friend of mine who lived in Napoli, he explained that his parents had been married for a long time, and I told him how unique, because so many of my friends in the U.S., a lot of them went through 2 different homes because they split time between their dad and their mom, and that divorce was extremely common. And he told me it is not common. And I said, that's crazy. Is it just because people are happier here? Is that it? And he said, no, I don't think so. I think we're normal. I think people just have their lives. But we do have a liberal mindset about men going out in an older age and finding a mistress. And it's not talked about, but it's understood. And it's somewhat not really frowned upon, especially in an individual household. And I thought that shit was fucking crazy. And it was weird to hear that.
That's some Sopranos type shit.
Yeah, right? I mean, like, it kind of is, right? It's that fucking, like, classic mob Latin family mentality thing. And it just, that felt surreal whenever he explained that. And I don't know whether it was because of the fact that I was a 19-year-old kid from Oklahoma who had just fucking spent 6 months living in Italy and was still trying to, like, understand all these, like, huge differences of our ways of life. So that one was a big one for sure.
Should I be worried? Because you just mentioned, like, it's a mob and Latin thing. I'm sorry. You're literally half Sicilian and half Peruvian. Like, should I be concerned? Those are the 2 groups that you just cherry picked of older men going out and having, like, a girlfriend on the side. Cool.
Well, the good news for you is that I'm not that culturally in touch. So I don't think you have anything to worry about, because I'm not trying to, like, touch on to those, like, cultural norms. So I think you're fine. I think you're definitely fine.
So to come back to the way of the USA and why we're shorter, I think that's an interesting perspective when you think about the rest of the world. I do know there's still a narrative here where I think people stay together for the kids, but I think we're seeing less of that. I think people are more apt to be independent, and who knows, like, think about all since my mom was, on her first marriage when she was a lot younger. Think about all the things that have come out where you can more easily find somebody. Online dating.
Yeah.
Think about, mobile apps. Like, everything is at the touch of your fingertips without really having to try a lot. So maybe people are like, I don't need to stick with this. It's so easy for me to find somebody. Why am I wasting my time if I'm not happy?
I don't know if technological advances in dating is necessarily going to shorten it. I think it's more going to probably make it a non-starter. I think people are not even gonna. I think we're probably gonna decrease in marriages overall by a
Well, we
significant
already
amount. Yeah,
we
I
already
think,
have, like,
yeah,
or people are getting
yeah.
married later and less.
So maybe that's a good thing. So maybe instead of, forcing the commitment for the sake of tradition or jumping in when you're younger, because they say if you get married under the age of 25, amount of people that actually get divorced is high percentage. Makes a lot of sense because you just don't find a ton of identity before the age of 25. You kind of find like the bits and pieces of it. You're kind of getting your groove into it. And then after 25, at least for me, and I think probably for you, I won't speak for you on this, but I found more of an identity even after the age of 25. It's so important to, I think, nail that down. And then once you really know yourself and then you really get a sense of the fact that you're happy as you as an individual, then at that point you'll freely open yourself up to that companion you're with.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I had a much stronger sense of self after the age of 25, which we got married when I was 26 and Sean was 28. But we were together like 7 years at that point.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. I would like to interject, though, that I think not only being a little older, and that's not that old, but, past your mid-20s,
Mm-hmm.
I think having experiences individually and together is key, because think about it. At that point, we literally graduated college, moved from Oklahoma to Florida, didn't know anybody. We had no safety net. We had like a couple grand, and I remember us being like, whoa, we're good. We got all these savings, and it's like, you've got like $8,000 combined, you freaking dummies. Like, what the fuck?
And no jobs.
And no jobs. I gave up my good job in Oklahoma where I was a business analyst. It was like my dream job, which, hey, like, no regrets. I would have never been where I am today or made the money I made if I didn't risk it. But I literally graduated, gave up my big job, and moved to Florida with no leads. And my parents were like, what the fuck? Like, why are you following this guy to Florida? What are you doing? You're crazy. Because I've always been a very logical woman. So they were just like, who are you? Like, what is this? But Sean had decided he was going to move to Florida, and we had just moved into an apartment together, and he told me that, and I had just started my internship of my big job, and he told me that was like my first week. And I was like, oh my God, I threw up. I've never done that out of like just nerves and like anxiety, and I threw up. I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And then I remember coming home being like, what do we do? We talked about being long distance. What do we, can we handle that? What would that look like? And we like ended up talking all night and deciding that, well, guess I'm moving with Sean.
I never wanted to stay in Oklahoma. I left Oklahoma when I was 18 and a half, like right out of high school. And when I came back from Europe for living there for like almost a year and a half, I knew that wasn't something that was going to be, for a long time. I knew that Oklahoma was just going to be for a little bit longer, and that I was going to leave as soon as I was able to. So
you weren't there for a long time. You were just there for a good time. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
That was a big life change that I decided to make. You decided to make. We literally sold all of our shit a couple months later, packed up our cars, drove cross country, moved to Florida. And I have to tell you, that first year, it was hard. We were very social people, and we fortunately made a lot of friends, but it was still finding friends, being on our own, navigating our first year of like full-time jobs, and it was a lot. So I would just say people need to have a lot of experiences. That's one of the many big experiences you and I had before we ever got married, before we ever got engaged. We were very committed. We loved each other, before we went through that. But that was such a necessary thing for us to figure our own lives out and how each other fit in it and how we can handle those big life moments. So I would say for anybody, they have to go through those types of experiences.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that. The amount of experiences a couple encounters through their time together is so important because if they're just doing the same shit over and over again and not really letting each other grow or take risks together, it feels like there's a lot of missed opportunity to take those chances and to develop themselves. That move for us was our big risk where we took that leap and it developed us, more. We gained new skills. We learned each other's weaknesses and strengths through that. And it was a real opportunity. Meanwhile, we could have not done that and we could have just, stayed safe about it. But then we would have probably missed a lot of experiences and a lot of learning that that we gained from that.
Yeah, and we would have been in Oklahoma still, which I think that was a little tumultuous for us. It would have been long term just because everybody was into everybody's business. And I think we needed to grow outside of people knowing our shit, and really enable each other to take those kinds of risk by moving away from that. And then I just want to point out that Jean, yes, we did learn each other's strengths and weaknesses. And Jean has learned that I have no weaknesses.
Hilarious. I think it's something very important to push each other to take risks, but at the same time for those risks to be somewhat measured, because it's not like you want to just burden each other with a high amount of stress for the sake of taking risks and then fucking just fall apart because of the fact that it's too much. I think that's probably the biggest natural attribute that Lauren and I have, is that I'm a bit more of a risk taker and Lauren is very analytical and much more measured. Those two things lend to each other because of the fact that I push Lauren to take a lot of risks. Meanwhile, she makes sure that I am seeing all of the steps that are ahead of me before we take those leaps. And a lot of times, we don't do it. We talk about a lot of things, but we don't do it. And then there are big life decisions like the 2 huge moves that we've done in our lives. We're literally crossing half the country and then crossing the whole fucking country, in the most recent move that we did. That is something that Lauren and I appreciate about each other, is that we know that that's important for us to be able to talk about those things with each other and know who brings what to the table on that point of view. And that perspective from each other is really good.
Yeah, and we both wear the pants in the family. But right now, we're not wearing any. No, I agree. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that's part of people and higher divorce rate or shorter time of being with one another. I still think although we've evolved as a society, I think there's still perhaps this unnatural push to get married, that everybody should just, have a relationship, get married, have kids, buy the house, that kind of thing. I think it's improving with our generation. I think the generation after us is probably going to be a little less conventional on that kind of stuff. So I'm curious to see how that evolves and, how that may change societally. Yeah. Honestly, Jean and I have had an unconventional relationship in multiple ways. We lived together after just a couple of months.
Not like 9 months.
Yeah, right. Less than a year. We have taken a lot of risk, and I won't get into the deep details, but our relationship we don't have children. We don't plan on having children. We have a little bit of a different type of relationship. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And I think that's interesting. Maybe people won't feel so forced into societal norms, that maybe they'll feel like they can be themselves and there's less pressure on a relationship. I don't know.
Yeah. I totally agree with you on that. I think the less conventional we see marriage or relationships, the more natural people will fall into the steps that make sense for them as individuals. I think that that's probably the biggest thing that will save the amount of time that people are together, or it'll save people the time to not jump into the next step and make them realize, you know what, maybe this didn't make sense. Maybe just because of the fact that we'd been in a long relationship, why do we need to get married?
Yeah.
You know, or we've been in a long relationship, why do we need to be together? We have learned a lot. The love is different. It's not like it was. You don't have any feeling there to want to develop that any longer. And they split up, and that's just seen as okay. And that's seen as just fine, because it's people just learning from each other in long relationships. And they didn't just jump into marriage. You know, and I'm sitting here playing out these scenarios in this fictitious like couple that's splitting up and trying to put a positive spin on it, whereas most people would say a couple that's been together for a long time, they should get married and then see if it works out. But that seems like a really fucking bad idea.
Very stupid. Marriage is not something to take lightly. Even though you can get divorced, man, you are combining essentially yourself into one entity, and it's a lot of paperwork, a lot of bullshit. I would not recommend it unless you are seriously committed to the other person. Oddly enough, that was just always something that I wanted to do with you. Like, I knew very early on, I thought, I think this is going to get to that point one day where we're going to get married. And, you know, I'm a very independent woman, and I have been, I think, open-minded to a lot of things. But even when we got married, like, I just knew I would take your name. Like, that was probably the most conventional thing that I've done.
I think to kind of go full circle on this, you know, we started talking about the fact that we're not going to talk so much about current events, and we're going to talk more about our relationship. It's just kind of somewhat personal things, but at the same time, things that come natural to us. And then we jumped into the topic of the length of time of an average marriage in the U.S. versus the world, and that it's nearly cut in half whenever you look at the average time of marriage in the U.S. And we talked about a lot of those factors. And I think, you know, we just skimmed the surface. Obviously, we talked about it for just like 20 minutes or something. That's not a very long time, but I think it's a good amount of time for us to kind of focus on those types of things and see how we can either make the decision not to jump into marriage just because it's the conventional step, or to understand how to enrich marriage by making sure you're growing and developing those through experiences. So I think maybe those are just a couple things that we've talked about that could be helpful to that. But, you know, we're not fucking couples therapists, so we're just talking. We're just seeing what we think would be helpful maybe to increase or, you know, not throw out the fucking marriage thing so early.
Yeah, I'm not a fucking expert, but
right.
I'm honestly curious what other people think, because I didn't really think about some of these things before. I haven't thought about them before, especially like the whole relationship, sexual or otherwise, at your fingertips through your phone. Like, that's a dynamic I didn't really consider until we were just talking about it now. That's got to have some kind of impact. I mean, it has impact on relationships pre-marriage. How does that impact a marriage when somebody deems it no longer viable?
Yeah.
And is it easier to jump out because he got a lot of options today?
Yeah. Maybe it's fulfilling on its own, and you don't need the commitment of time or the commitment of marriage to be with somebody to have sex some people used to think.
Anyway, I'm not a fucking expert, but thanks for listening. We'd appreciate it. We'll see how this format goes in the next couple of episodes. We may switch it up. I don't know. Give us your thoughts. We'd love to hear you in the comments. Let us know your opinions on why is the divorce rate higher in the U.S. or yeah, and why is marriage not lasting as long?
All right, guys. Follow us on social media. You can find us on
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube at WNF Podcast.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.